I've been blessed to have put Screenwriter on my tax returns every year since 1999. It's been a journey filled with high peaks and deep valleys, and if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. That's a lie. I'd change a bunch of stuff. Okay. Maybe not. Let's deal with this. All right. So this is the Merriam-Webster def of ethos. Why we're all here today. The characteristic spirit of a culture, era, or community as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. Now, what stands out to me in that definition is as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. Now, at the risk of being a little general here, I think you can make a pretty good argument that our current ethos is all about aspiring to be relevant, aspiring to be influential, aspiring, to be successful, to be liked and followed. And influence seems to suddenly matter above everything else, what you appear to be to other people, see me. And I noticed I found this article recently. I think it was Wired magazine, but I can't remember now. But this article said that there were more selfies taken in 2021 than there were photographs taken between 1980 and 2000. And that it's not great for our ethos. But while there's nothing wrong with that feeling of needing to be seen, I think it's the version that's important. Our society's created this culture where our desire to be liked and followed and approved is so great that people will end up creating false images of themselves. And it all becomes about success and look how great I am. And instead of being seen for who we authentically are, we'd rather be seen for, what we appear to be, what we're accomplishing. And the idea of wanting to be liked and relevant and all that has obviously been around long before social media. So I'm just going to share my own sort of experience with our subject, which is ethos. My origin story is all too common for writers. I had what could be considered an unsatisfying childhood. We won't go any deeper than that, or this will turn into a therapy session, and nobody wants to see that. But to escape that world, I would make up characters and situations and worlds, and I was obsessed. I would lose myself watching movies and television. And around 5th grade, I started writing stories, and they were stories about my friends, like to make them laugh. But it was really for me to feel validated, to be liked, like me. And now, due to time constraints, I apologize to any editors in the room. We're going to jump from 5th grade to my time at U of A. So I was a creative writing major, which didn't help my creative writing at all. My professors there were all frustrated, unpublished novelists, and so class time was always, this is why Hemingway sucks, and this is why Faulkner's overrated. And they didn't feel relevant. They didn't feel seen, they didn't feel validated. And this was really harshing my chi as a writer because I loved writing. Like, I wasn't, an economics major or anything. I wanted to write, and I just wrote all the time. And because I love movies and television so much, I graduated to writing screenplays. So I left U of A for Hollywood with all my screenplays in hand, and what I didn't know till I got to Hollywood is that when your screenplays are handwritten in spiral notebooks as opposed to typed up on 12-point Courier font and printed out, it sort of lends the air of amateur to you. And so, there was pretty steep learning curve those early years in Hollywood, but again, I loved every second of it. I was living off of Top Ramen and Kraft mac and cheese, and I was just writing all the time. I was in love with the process, with just creating. And after almost 10 years, I finally landed my first professional paid gig as a screenwriter on a show called Felicity. And that first year as a professional was terrifying and gut-wrenching, and the story of that year would require its own CreativeMornings session. But I managed to do well enough that I got another job, and that's what it becomes all about. It's a very nomadic life, being a screenwriter. But I was in the club now. I was getting hired from show after show, and the more success I had, the more I chased it. You know, if I was a co-producer, I wanted to be a producer. If I was a producer, I had to be a supervising producer. Then I had to be a co-executive producer. And the better the credit, the better the money, but also the better the external validation and success and approval. And I was convinced that the key to success, the key to happiness, was other people's approval. So basically all my dreams had come true. I was writing on all these shows. I was this big deal. Professional screenwriter. I was making more money than I ever imagined, more than anyone in my family ever made or thought any Guyot could make. And as far as Hollywood, I was relevant and I was influential and I was liked. But I wasn't really happy. At the time, I was in this lifeless marriage. You know, I got married for all the wrong reasons. And I was so broken back then. You know, I was so convinced that self-worth was 100% tied to the approval of others. And that manifested in my marriage by me doing everything I could to try to get the approval of a person that could only be pleased if I was somebody I wasn't, if I was somebody completely inauthentic to myself. So in 2013, I finally found this speck of self-worth big enough to pull the plug and get divorced. And while that was ultimately a great life-saving decision, it was brutal. You know, I mean, anyone here who's been through it, I feel you. It is horrible. But it was the first step out of that darkness and self-loathing for me. So not long after the divorce, a little bit long after the divorce, I met this person who I'm absolutely convinced God sent into my life. It was the whole soulmate thing, you know? Like, finally I felt loved for who I really was. I finally felt like somebody wanted my love, you know, back. And so what did I do? I put all my self-worth into that other person. But I was so happy, you know? I was so happy that I never noticed I was still making the same mistakes. I wasn't seeing those red flags. So when the soulmate dumped me, guess what? I spiraled out a bit. Sobbing on the floor in the fetal position in my Burbank apartment. But this is what writers call a plot twist. Within the same 48 hours of the soulmate destroying me, I was handed the reins of this television series called The Librarians. And we were about to start season 2. I was a co-executive producer. I was the number 2 in charge after the showrunner. And our showrunner had a pilot at NBC that got picked up the series. So it took him about 4 seconds to decide to leave because NBC money is about 5 times what basic cable money is. So suddenly the sobbing on the floor in the fetal position guy was in charge of the entire production. The 200 plus people, the creative direction of the show, the $3 million the network and studio were spending each week. And here's the thing, I absolutely knew that I was completely incapable of running a television show, even if I wasn't an emotional train wreck like I was at the time. But this is where I learned one of those funny things in life. You never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. And I didn't have any other choice. I had to do it. And you know, there were literally days on The Librarians where I would show up at work, I'd show up at set, we shot up in Portland, and I would order 200 people around and make all these decisions and be in charge, and then I'd excuse myself and say, I gotta run to the restroom, and I would go into the bathroom and I would just bawl my eyes out for a minute or two. And splash water on my face and do that Joe Gideon thing, like, it's showtime, folks, and I'd go back out and I'd go as long as I could until I had to go excuse myself again. But eventually I stopped crying, and I brought that show in that year on time, on budget, and creatively, I gave the network its highest ratings ever. Wow. So I had done it in my mind, you know. Not only did I learn I was a pretty good screenwriter, but I was a pretty good producer, I was a pretty good showrunner, I was a good leader. And so after that season on Librarians, I come back to Hollywood, and I'm hot, to use a ridiculous agent term. You know, I was in demand, I was relevant, I was influential, you know, I was validated. And over the next year, I sold my own series in this giant bidding war, Don't ask me what it was because it never ended up going, but it made all the headlines in the trades. I was being offered all these high-paying gigs, and I co-wrote this giant sci-fi movie which sold for a then record 7-figure sum. Now, I want to pause here and apologize to anyone who paid to see Geostorm. If you send me your address, I'll reimburse you. So, but despite the payday, the entire experience of this movie, from the writing of it, through the production, through the release, the reception, was a total disaster, pun acutely intended. And it was yet another red flag I missed, you know? I was so consumed with the validation and the success and being that guy, you know, being seen. So when it came out and it was less than approved, what did I do? My characteristic spirit manifested in the beliefs and aspirations that I had to prove I'm not the Geostorm guy. I'm better than that. I was going to show people, you know, that I'm still relevant, I'm still influential, I'm still a success. So because I'd been thrown into movie jail because of this, I went back to television, where I was royalty. And I took this job. I was the co-executive producer on NCIS New Orleans, which at the time was, believe this or not, the 6th biggest show in the world. Whoa. Right? We're still trying to figure that out. But I was making more money than I ever had in my life. I was, again, liked and relevant and influential. I was doing podcasts. I was doing interviews. I was running around with celebrities. I was staying in 5-star hotels. I was, you know, eating at Nobu now instead of Top Ramen. And my life was the greatest it had ever been. And I was completely depressed. So much so, like, I was on meds for my depression and then meds to help me sleep because I couldn't sleep because of the meds for the depression. But I had everything I had been chasing, you know? I had attained the characteristic spirit of the culture, and I wanted to kill myself. And so I was like, how did I get here? You know, I have everything, you know? Don't you always resent those people? It's like, they're so rich, why aren't they happy? And to paraphrase one of the great philosophers of our time, BoJack Horseman, when you look at everything through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. And so I was just, you know, a wreck. And then I had an epiphany, literally. And it wasn't in a church with stained glass windows and organ music. It was in a Ford Explorer driving through mud outside of New Orleans with a guy named Virgil, who always smelled like oysters and Cheetos. And so one rainy morning, I'm in New Orleans for the shoot, and I'm standing outside my hotel waiting for Virgil to pick me up. And I'm just standing out there. I remember this like it was last week. I'm just standing out there like a complete zombie. I just have no emotion, I'm just a blank slate. And I'm looking at these dark clouds, you know, because it's supposed to rain all day. And suddenly, it's like 5 a.m., like the sun hasn't even come up yet. And I'm just staring out. And then these dark clouds start to part right when the sun is breaking over the horizon. And it's amazing. The sun's coming up and the dark clouds are parting. There's all this blue sky and these rays of sunshine. And I'm just standing there staring at this thing in awe. And it's like this pure, serene image, which is then shattered when the Ford Explorer pulls into my frame of view and Virgil goes, "Sun ain't gonna last more than a minute, no." And I'm like body slammed back into the reality of my life. And Virgil and I are in this Explorer, and we're driving way out. It was like a 45, 50-minute drive out to set, and it's pouring rain, and he's blathering on about something I'm not even listening to him. I'm just staring out the window. My head's against, you know, the glass, and I'm just looking at all these dark clouds, which are here again. The sun's gone, and it's all raining. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is a metaphor for my life, these dark clouds, you know? Like I'm wondering, when's the blue sky ever going to come back? Why doesn't the blue sky stay? Why doesn't it come back? And then, for whatever reason, it hits me in this moment that The dark clouds are what comes and goes, but the blue sky is always there. And I turned to Virgil and I said, I can't do this anymore. And he had no idea what I was talking about at all, you know. But I didn't want to write the show. I didn't want to write on someone else's show anymore. I didn't want to work in the giant machine that is network television. I wanted to be that writer I used to be, the one that was happy eating top ramen, the one that was just in love with the process of creation, the process of just making stuff up, you know, without thought of financial outcomes or potential. And I realized that not in spite of, but because of all those peaks and valleys that I went through, that season in hell on librarians and Geostorm and my personal life imploding and everything, it was because of that, because of all my bad choices, because of all that, that I had finally hit this moment of self-awareness. And I finally appreciated me for me. I took those rose-colored glasses off, and you know, I learned at 50 years old that relevancy and influence and likes and follows and how much money you have and the manifestation of all of that, everything that our culture holds up as wins, it really doesn't matter one single bit. And so when it came time for me to re-up on the show, to go back for the next season, I said no. And my agents lost their minds. Not only was, according to them, I was committing career suicide, but they'd never had a writer that was walking away from the biggest payday of their career, and they were right. For me to return to that next season on NCIS New Orleans, they were offering me $676,750 for about 10 months of work. And so when I said no to that officially, my agents were done with me. They stopped taking my calls. Suddenly I was that guy, you know, that didn't want to play nice with other people. Nobody asked me to do interviews anymore or podcasts. I wasn't running around with celebrities anymore. I certainly wasn't eating at Nobu. But what I was doing is I was creating again for myself and for the love of the process of writing. And this new attitude led me to discover a whole new joy, which was giving back, like teaching and mentoring, helping these people that have the same screenwriting dreams that I had, you know, achieve them, but maybe do it in a healthier way than I did. So that's me this year, 2022. Happy, stress level at DEFCON 0. And here's really my point to all this. We're all playing with the house's money. We only have a limited time here. Happiness isn't something that we find or buy or get through likes and follows and other people's approval. We create it right here. And in the 3 years since I turned down that offer, I've made a fourth about of what I would have made in that 1 year. But I've never been more productive as a writer. I've never enjoyed writing as much. I've never been a better writer, I believe, as I am now. I've never been a better person, a better father, a better partner. I've never been more at peace. The characteristic spirit of a culture, era, or community as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. My beliefs and aspirations today are to honor this God-given gift of being an artist, you know, to be a creative like everyone in here, to create my art and to create inspiration and motivation in others, to create my own peace and my own happiness, not from external quantifications, you know, but from right here. And maybe I was thinking, if enough others do the same, our ethos will change. Thanks for listening.